So I think the main question I will answer at the end. And let's start the what today's lecture we are. Okay, okay, thank you. The today's again this second part I would say, because it is oddly it's connected with the previous sequence of lecture in terms of you can say ideological and metaphilosophical things that I had put up before you. And one of the problems that as a student of you can say international relations is that we are really apprehensive of methodological tools, because in IR there is no specific you can say patent of tools, and the empirical or you can say the other forms of knowledge we gather from other domains, that is quite welcomed in IR. So means the whole diversity and plurality of IR's research method itself actually works against the very patenting of any special methodology. That's why the whole problem actually is that we should not get into some kind of trivialization of methodology. I hope you get this term. Trivialization means there are certain obvious facts, and obvious facts should not be our conclusions. So that is the what I wanted to communicate, that if that obvious fact becomes a conclusion, then there is hardly anything substantial in terms of research. So that is why the one of the big problems in IR is that there is a mix of methods we use, and in that method the rigor, there is always a question of how serious the research is, how serious that conclusion can we can arrive at, what is the prognostic value. So all these are somewhere have their important relationship in that. So this part of data science that I wanted to share with you, this domain is largely connected to the computers, and data is not actually a monopoly of computer. Data was also previously collected, data has been processed, data has been used, the numbers have been interpreted, but the human understanding, or you can say the number systems, the methods and models, they all have been existing. For example, Pearson coefficient of correlation has been almost more than 150 years old, or you can say other statistical averages mean they are as old as, I mean, quite an old phenomena. But the whole data science itself actually emerged from the special role that computers performed, and that special role was that data storing and data retrieval. So ability to store the data and ability to retrieve data repeatedly can be used to generate many other, you can say, combinations and other kind of permutations. So that ability of computers also created what you call an ancillary memory unit for the you can say human mind, and that ancillary unit later allowed us to you can say define many modular approaches while working with this data. So if you look into this idea of data science, then data science is basically defined as the process of extracting meaningful knowledge from data. Means data can throw up many kinds of you can say observations, and the observations which can further connect to your own you can say, I would use the term biases. Means you have certain biases, you have preconceived notions, you have certain queries, you have certain hypothetical structures in mind, and data may endorse them, data may also counter those biases, data may also look into those mental aspects. So your interaction with the data and your own thought process or your own mental construct, when it interacts with the data, then it tries to bring up new information, new knowledge to you, and that is why data science is very important. So it is a help in our, you can say, mental exegesis, means your mental practice, and that is why it includes several disciplines while working with data under the format of data science. For example, you work with the knowledge of computer sciences, you work with the knowledge of mathematics, you work with the knowledge of statistics. Data warehousing itself is now a very big domain, and data processing itself becomes another area of, you can say, interaction. Then the next most important aspect is that the data distribution and data transaction and data interaction, that can only happen unless that happens in a very smooth fashion, then data analytics cannot proceed, and data analytics needs to interact or transact data on a very rapid fashion. That's why internet has always been a very important, you can say, partner in data transactions and data generation and data sharing, and that is why internet also becomes a very important part in data analytics, the predictive analytics or knowledge discovery, and machine learning and data mining. These are very nowadays very conspicuous terms, but they have a very wide range of interpretations. So one of the challenges I want to underline before proceeding into further detail is that as we get ourselves exposed more and more to the various aspects of data science, the challenge also increases, that what are the appropriate tools, what are the appropriate range of interpretations that we can use for our understanding, because everything in data science cannot be used in IR, or IR's own purpose or IR's own objective and goals have a certain structure. If that structure is not kept in mind, then we ultimately end up in being some kind of a, you can say, petty computer operator. Means our own goals and objectives may get defeated, and we may go into some kind of trivialization. Again, the term is important, that our research should not become trivialized. Means our research should not throw up the ordinary conclusions, such as the sun rises from the east. So that is an obvious conclusion. So these are some of the challenges that have to be understood while going into the data science with the mind of a social scientist, or with the mind with the student of IR. So we can use it as one of the caution note. So another aspect, the most important, you can say, the transformative aspect in this data driven research is that perhaps for a student of social science, this is something to be think over, they should ponder over, that usually what we do is we take a fact and we try to imagine some kind of a hypothetical assessment or a situation, and that hypothesis needs to be verified, or it has to be repudiated by various causal analysis. Again, the causality becomes very important for the student of social sciences or IR. Now this causality itself, you can say, it's a matter of investigation, and you can further your exploration based on those requirements of the causality. But sometimes what happens, that you are not able to get the exact goal in terms of explaining the causes, then you are actually looking into some kind of a ontological discovery of factors, which can somewhere, you can say, endorse, or somewhere they can push the argument of causality. This ontological exercise, this ontological, you can say, push is available in data sciences. So means your direct relationship with the forces in action is not available, but the data is somewhere is an agent, or you can say the ontological phenomena, which is trying to relate some kind of relate between the factors, and that data tries to supplant the idea of causality. So that's why data becomes an ontological force in explaining the phenomena, and this is a very important fact, because if data is used as an ontological phenomena, then the problem of factity and the truthfulness of the data, how far that thing is true, that becomes very important, because otherwise you may come with entirely you can say false premises or false answers. That is one of the riskier things. In fact, if that is the case, then you can see if it's the superpower. So for example, during the Cold War, US and USSR, they all had you can say almost on alert on several occasions their forces. And should we believe that if some factity is not there in terms of data and data ontology, if it's, that is to be relied on some of those situations, they might lead to some kind of a, you can say, false premises that the adversary is bent upon taking the first step, which cannot be responded in the second instance. So that can really lead to some kind of a spontaneous action. So these kind of the problems of ontology are very difficult. I mean, especially for the people who are policy making and who look how to dominate the situation, and if they do not have the direct access to the causality, then they try to build up a scenario, and there the data ontology is very important, so as to not to arrive at the wrong conclusions. Otherwise weapons of mass destructions and one single wrong conclusion can lead to destruction of the earth. So these are somewhere, you can say, hypothetical. I am just giving you a situation, a hypothetical situation, how you can think of various relationship between the actual causality of forces and how the ontological understanding of data in explaining the causes can go hand in hand. So as a student of you can say social sciences, there may be a big question: if that is the power of data sciences, then what should what should be my equipment? How should I equip myself in order to really able to use that knowledge? So this is one of the graphs I've tried to depict. I borrowed it from the website, and it has several dimensions. It says that you should be good at maths and at statistics, your ethical skills should be good, you should be team player because it needs a lot of multiple dimensions of work. Your coding skill should be good, and data wrangling and data visualization and all these blah blah. The point here is that this is just one scenario which asks that if you are really want to be a data scientist. But if you ask me that you are a student of international studies, whether this is your requirement, no, this is not your requirement, but this is a requirement of a person with whom you want to interact, and that guy is a data scientist. Because your knowledge, you want to integrate your knowledge with somebody who is good at these skills. This is what I wanted to share with you. You don't have to acquire these skills, you definitely do not need to, but yes, if you are interested in acquiring, that is more the merrier, that is very good thing. But the point is that you should be knowing that if you want to use this knowledge, then your team player should be having these qualities, so that you can work or you can team up with that player in terms of working with the interdisciplinary roles. So that is why data scientists usually have these kind of skills, and you can use those skills of those data scientists in order to utilize your own collection of data or your gathering of data. The one of the parametric of significance is the data explosion, means how much data is being generated today. And just compare with this two statistics that are available in this slide. All the human words spoken by all people on the earth, by whatever language they are using, it's not more than 5 exabytes. And the overall volume of data that is being accumulated is more than 40,000 exabyte. 1 exabyte is 10 to the power 18. Now you can imagine how much volume of data that is being generated by humanity. And if that is the volume, then working with data not only is important, but it is also difficult also, because you cannot really work with those volumes in extraordinary manner. You really have to be choosy that what kind of data is appropriate for you. Every data cannot be appropriate for you, or your goals should also be refined, that if data has certain limitations, then can you modify your goals in accordance with that limitation. So all these things have to be judged and balanced, because data is exploding like anything. That is the one of the assumptions. Then the whole idea of discovering the knowledge is very important, because yeah, anything you want to say something, you can intervene me. uh, so this whole idea of interaction, the knowledge discovery from data is quite important. And this is because the very purpose of our, as a student of you can social sciences, to work with this data is to get the right kind of knowledge that enable us to understand the international order. So if I ask the student why a student of international studies wants to work with the data, I think his first obvious answer should be that I want to understand this world so that I can better understand the conditions of war and peace. I want to understand what are the conditions of you can say the power relationships and the hierarchy in the world. What are the agents and institutional preferences that govern the choices of you can say interstate relations, and there are many aspects, and all these aspects can be handled as a system of knowledge, and this system of knowledge can be further conditioned by the knowledge of discovery or the data. If you have certain data and you can condition that system of knowledge, then it enables you to get more and more information in that sense. Yes, okay. So this data science has three broad legs. It's a tripod stand. You can say that it's a stool with the three legs, and the one part is data analytics, one part is data mining, and another part is data visualization. You can be fond of any of the three things. I mean, sometimes what happens that when students try to do little bit of computer sciences, especially the student of social sciences, they are fancied by certain qualities of data science. For example, for me, data visualization is very good. I like data visualization. Some students from mathematical background, they like data analytics very good because they know that machine learning is something they want to get more and more. Some who are actually good from IT background, purely for them mining is also very good. So it actually has, it's a kind of a, I mean, the three kind of ice creams, you have vanilla, some you have chocolate, and some orange, something like that. You can think of that. So, and there is nothing harm in having that kind of preference, because it only helps you to gel with the domain and discipline. Because sometimes if you don't like ice creams any at all, then there is a real problem, because then you really would like to, I mean, you have to really think hard that which area should I, because you need one of the doors to get into data science. You need one of the entry gates. These are the three entry gates, and you choose one, which one you like it. So data analytics is basically, these are, I mean, to put it very simple, it can be as simple as having the mean, mode, median. You understand these three statistical terms to get an average, to get the central point, or the frequency, or the tendency. So it can be very simple as such, and it can be complex up to the, for example, regression models, or you have the first order, second order, you can say curve fitting also. So mathematical differential equations can also be used in those model building. So they can go to any extent in terms of complex model building. So data analytics is largely a domain of mathematical sciences. Students of mathematical sciences usually are good at making those models and try to predict. The predictability is the most important part of the data analytics. If you want to predict something, some event based on the previous data, that is the most important quality of data analytics. Data mining is something which is very different, but yes, they all are interrelated. I mean, they are set conditions with each other. So that is something which is important for you. That data mining is something which basically means that there is a random data that is available to you, but that random data which is available to you, you want to have a very particular set of data based on your requirement. What you need data for, that is very important. For example, I just talked to you about little bit about it, that Minsk analytics, the question that was asked. So means that I am interested in a very particular set of tweets which are related to very particular country or particular event. So means the ability to transact data based on particular key structures, key formulations, and gather as much as data based on those structure and formulations allows you to have a very specific set of data, and that is known as data mining. So social media analytics means the data of social media. It's I mean, all these data are having innumerous dimensions. They can have innumerous dimensions, but which dimension is of relevance to you, you should be working with that. Otherwise data is, again, the explosion thing is going to hit you hard, because if you are not really clear about your dimensions, you really cannot mine the data. So that is why it is just like mining means just a coal miner or any in a mine. You have a direction because you find that the raw material is being in a particular direction. So that is why you start mining that. So that is why gathering data with a particular intention is important, and the trends which you want to identify, or the trends, this becomes a kind of a tautology. Tautology means when you are working with particular set of data, that trends will obviously be visible in that data. But the point here is that it is not about the known things that you gather a data, it is about the unknown things that you want to gather data. Okay, I want to know about Belarus, I want to know about the situation about Lukashenko and Tikhanovskaya, but the point here is not that. The point is that what are the other forces that can be revealed, that can be shown by the example of collecting of those tweets. So the to know the known is obvious in data mining, but to know the unknown is also another aspect of understanding, and that is where data mining becomes very important. Then the relationship is very you can say the data mining and data analytics have a very close relationship, because if you have discovered some patterns, if you are able to know something interesting, then you try to quantify and model it, because the prognostic value becomes very important. And that is why the data processing in accordance to the requirement of the model which you want to apply, and also the various parameters that you want to use, you want to identify those parameters in the data. All those relationships bring in data mining and data analytics quite closer. You can apply the model at any level. You can apply the model at a very basic level. There is no need to think of a very high level statistical jargon that you want to have some very complex equations. No, that depends on what your goal is, why you want to use that data. So for example, if I want to know that what is the per capita income of the countries and what is their military expenditure, I would just gather the data from WDI and I will try to collect a list that okay, these are the countries with the high per capita income, and this is their military expenditure, and this is their expenditure on other sectors. So means the point here is that you can always use data in a simpler form based on your aims and objectives, and the complex tasks, if you have that skill, it's okay, but there is no kind of a, you can say, barrier to the use of data. Data can be used at any level. At a simpler level, the data mining and data analytics can be used, and at a very complex level also you can go based on your team which is available, or you want to do it on your own. That also is another case. Then these are the some, you can say, basic you can say charting rules. I mean, in data mining, data analytics, you come across these kind of languages, and nothing to get turned off by these languages, because you don't need to work on this if you are really working only purely in the your social science domain. But yes, definitely these are the enablers which give you the data. So for example, Python is a language, SQL, structured query language, C++, Java, these are the basic you can say nitty-gritties or languages through which the data is kept, data is delivered, data is processed, data is transferred. So these are the languages. And the R programming language is nowadays a very popular, and for the students also nowadays universities are actually having a dedicated course on R programming language, because it has a very nice portal, and visualization work is quite interesting in R as well. So you can think of learning R. It's I mean, for me, I can tell you that I being a social scientist and no formal training in computer science, I have learned this thing on my own. So based with the guidance, I think you can do it much faster in the universities. So whether to know this languages, all these languages is necessary or not, again my answer is that it depends on what is your approach and attitude to it. If you are really keen at doing data analysis in your own way, then yes, knowing these languages is a good thing. And if you want that, you want only somebody to help you out in this, then if at all there's no problem in you can leave this domain entirely to the hands of computer IT specialists. Then mining knowledge from data is basically, these are the steps which you usually do. Data is always in the raw form. I mean, the point here is that there's a lot of noise in the data, and you want a very particular kind of the specialized data, and that is the one of the big problems, that unless you are not really clear about what are the particular variables you want to address, data has many things. For example, I will be discussing with you on Twitter what kind of basic structure is there and how you can dress the data from Twitter. Then data pooling, because it comes from so many sources that you have no idea that, I mean, you have to bring things into one place. That is also very important. Paneling, because if you want to process the analytical tool, then paneling is important. Aggregation is also again important because you want to store the data for future use. Then pattern visualization and knowledge presentation. So once you have done those analysis, then you should communicate that, okay, I have found this is the outcome of my research, or this is the outcome of my study from the data. So that presentation also, it becomes a very important aspect, because after all, at the end of the day, it's the outcome which matters to us. You may be doing the whole day good amount of algorithms and work, but if you're not able to come with something very convincing in terms of knowledge and the rigor, then that again the problem of trivialization occurs, and trivialization of knowledge can happen because again the data is a very strong ontological power. So for the I'm narrowing my discussion closer and closer to the what you call the tweets and Twitter. So I am again shortening my domain. Earlier I was talking about data in general, but now I am talking about the textual data, because that is what actually matters to us. We read books, we read articles, we read the tweets, we read social media comments, we respond to those comments, we react to the comments, and we are almost in all kind of platforms. We are in social media platforms. We almost type with the nowadays the Android mobiles are the handy tools. We daily throw up some kind of text, whether it's a small text or it's a large text, but really it allows us to express ourselves. That's a very important thing, because the text allows us to react to certain things, and that is why the textual data that is being generated is in a huge volume by the humanity, and you can get the data from the blogs also. You can get the data from various platforms. That is known as the scraping of the data, and you can also, there is known as the API. I am not going to go deep into these technical terms, but I will definitely try to touch and explain in brief what these means. They are the application programming interface. Means whenever you want to have a data, you need to have some kind of a consent from somebody who is providing you the data. So API is something like a kind of a consent. Somebody has agreed to give you the data. You cannot have the data without anybody's consent. So whether it's a Facebook or LinkedIn or Twitter or any platform, the APIs are just like some kind of keys which allow you to have the data. Otherwise, scraping the data from the website really does not need these kind of keys, but these specific platform, because there is a lot of privacy issue into. I will come to that part also at the end of the lecture. The data itself has many ethical aspects also. So tagging the data, tag extraction means you have a very you can say very limited you can say you can control your data through the specialized keywords. So the tag extraction of the data is very important. Then tokenization or splitting the sentence, because the numbers are something which are good at one thing, that you can always discretely work with the numbers, But with the words of dictionary, how can you really make out anything? Really can't make out anything from the word of dictionary. In fact, it is the sentence which really matters to us in terms of textual data. So unless you have a full sentence, the meaning of the words does not itself make any sense. It is the communication, what you want to communicate, that is very much important, and that is why the sentence becomes very important in terms of understanding the context, or what somebody wants to communicate, what are his feelings, whether that indicates to the relationship with other entities. All those things are at least the minimum unit of analysis. The why I wanted to emphasize this word sentence is because sentence becomes a minimum unit of analysis. If that is a minimum unit of analysis, then understanding the sentence, and computers and machines should be able to extract that what are the sentences, where it starts, where it ends. And we all know punctuation marks are there, but sometimes people do not use punctuation mark. People forget to put up the full stop or comma or anything in terms of you can say syntactical structure. Then even then computer should be able to understand, okay, this is the part which is a sentence. So these are the you can say the processing of the language, where you have this textual data, and this part has to be understood. Now there is a long history of this kind of practice, and digital humanities labs are mostly in the, I'm in the Western universities. The Stanford is the leader, the Berkeley and the Yale have been the leaders in using the digital humanities. They have a dedicated courses there. And the various government institutions are also using this kind of approach in understanding and communicating with the masses. So UK parliamentary system, they work for you, is some kind of a you can say a language database, and where you can do little bit of you can say data collection for your requirement. That is something they have. So means the institutions, the governments are also interested to provide you the data, so that they can communicate to you that what we are doing. That is also a very important aspect. So were you able to read or go through up to slide 10, or it was, can some student tell me? Or shall I continue with this slide number 11?
Yeah,
Okay, thank you.
yes, continue.
Okay. So I'm sorry with the interruption, because the Zoom has limitation. That's why I prefer to use Google Meet. It's a smooth. It does not give you that kind of break. So okay. But anyway,
Uh-huh.
uh, let's.
Maybe we wait for 1 minute
Okay, we'll wait.
to
I'll.
let guys to.
Yeah. Sure.
Okay.
Uh, we I have this kind of little bit of another technical limitation, because my operating system is basically Linux. I don't use Windows.
Mm.
So that is also maybe one of the reasons why some limitation may be there. But I think my screen is visible and I am audible, then everything is fine. That for me, I think that is the minimum that I expect. Are the students they are joining?
Only one.
Okay, no problem. I'll wait for another 2 minutes. No issue.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, yeah, we have
Mm-hmm. We have Nikita.
Nikit, Alexandra Kozireva, and Tutkin, Balinskaya Alexandra. So all they have joined.
Approximately, yes.
Uh,
We can continue, I believe.
okay. So just my screen is visible and I am audible, I guess, to you
Yeah.
all. Hmm. You can also give me thumbs up in the chat box. If there is some issue, just put me in the chat box so that I can follow that. Okay. So what I was talking to you through this slide was that the we had discussed data as general, but now I am narrowing my discussion to the textual data, because as a student we are largely concerned with the text that is important to us. So this textual data becomes very much important in understanding this. And the relevant part of understanding this textual data is that the sentence becomes a very important unit. And why? Because the ability to communicate and what are the you can say interpretations and various meanings of the intentions that can only be gained through sentence. This was I was talking in difference to the numbers, because data is basically largely working with the numbers. And when you talk about numbers, numbers can be processed in a very different manner, but for processing the sentence you need very different kind of approach and understanding. And that is what I wanted to say, that many our universities in Europe, and especially in US and America and in UK, they are having the digital humanities lab, where the sentence structures, the semantic, the word semantic becomes important. semantic. So semantic understanding of the sentence becomes very important in order to understand what exactly is being communicated. So there are interpretative aspects, there are levels of understanding that becomes very important in understanding this textual data. So for social scientists this becomes a matter of huge interest. And if you go into the textual data mining, then there are simpler aspects and there are very complex aspects. I've just wanted to introduce you to, so that you really need not connect yourself right now, but over a period of time you may come across these terms. That is why I wanted to introduce these terms. For example, name, entity recognition and classification. This means that, for example, if you look into a particular, say, again, let's go to the Minsk example. You want to know what Lukashenko is saying, and you also want to know what Tikhanovskaya is saying, and how people of Belarus want to react. They are reacting. So there, somebody who is reacting is a person or an organization. What is the time usually? I mean, what is his reaction? Is it a very long statement, or it's something like a emoticon, the emoji that has been given? So all these have their own interpretations. People try to interpret the reaction in various aspects. So in order to further complex analysis, you have to build through the simpler analysis. And through simpler steps means you try to collect the usernames, who want and who are actually, what is there any community level of organization, whether they people belong to particular group, is there any geographical relationship, or is there only a coincidental temporal relationship, or is there any other kind of a propaganda relationship? Because there are also you can say motivated actions as well. Some people are asked to react at a certain point of time, and in order to increase the what you call the opinion building, that is called the consent building. So there are normative practices as well. So all these can be broken into simpler ideas, and these are the named entity recognition classification. So person, organization, date and time. Then you have the ontological building, means you have particular sets of relationship which you have derived from those entities, and those can be used repetitively for every time you want to do some kind of data analysis. For example, how should I say so? I mean, ontology building is largely basically in a computer science, it means you have a certain what you call the explanation for particular data, and that explanation can be used every time when that kind of data appears. So that is what I actually want to keep it simple. Then the sentence detection, then tokenization. Again, I have told you that it means that building of the vocabulary, and lemmatization means it goes to the root words. So you really do not go into those details, just know the terms, so that whenever you come across these terms, so you should be telling yourself, oh, I have read this term or heard this term before also. So as a social scientist, particularly, you are not really expected to go into those. Data mining and data analysis can be done on a much simpler level. These are largely the lexical steps devised by the computer science operators for the how to create various algorithms. So the visualization becomes a very important part. Now this is also an area where I work most, and I like to work. Why? Because one of the reasons is because I am a geographer. So for a geographer, the map is the first thing that I am fond of maps, and maps can be map itself is a language. Map itself is a communication. Just as the Chinese proverb says that a picture is worth the 1,000 words. So similarly, a map is a tool to communicate many things, and that is why visualization is a very interesting part. It also is interesting because learning visualization is not really tough. You can really do many things, and also the ability to communicate is strongest. I mean, see, if I want to communicate my data analytical tool, then for example, if I have done some kind of model analysis, unless you understand that model, I will not be able to communicate its findings. So a certain level of you can say frequency match is required between the researcher and the audience. If the researcher and the audience are at certain level of statistical expediency, then that communication becomes very good. But for data visualization, it is something like, I mean, you really can communicate even to a layman through the visualization that what you really want to say. That is why for a student of social sciences, it is a natural attraction that you go for visualization. Data mining and data analytics, you still may not be really keen to learn at, but I will really encourage that data visualization is something which actually comes to your help, because you want to communicate an idea, and through visualization your communication becomes very strong. Then these are one of the most important background to the study of data sciences is that the content analysis. Now content analysis is something which has been done for more than 100 years. Computer science or computers were not there, but people were doing content analysis by getting the reports, and there were foreign office. The most important task of the foreign office used to be to get the daily brief, and that daily brief was catalogued, and the foreign office used to create a kind of a script. Okay, these are the information we are getting from the neighboring countries, and what is being talked about, what is being spoken, and they used to create a kind of a daily roster of events and their analysis, and that was used to be passed on to the minister of the foreign office so that he can give some statement. So yeah, so means the point here, why I want to contextualize this with the students, because you are all students of IR, that content analysis has been regularly been done. It is done in the armed forces as well. In armed forces also, if you are intercepting in the war field, the communications of the people, the communications of the on the ground, the local people. So it is called the day-to-day intelligence also. So content means what people speak, what is kind of speech is given, what kind of ideas are being thrown up, that is being tried to interpret, and some kind of a predictive analysis. So it is almost a well-established science, much earlier than the data science. And I must tell you one thing. See, as a student, or you can say, I was talking to Marina also earlier, that the students of Russia, you must know one thing. Soviet Union and Russia has been the object of content analysis for more than 80 years by the Western capitalist countries. I mean, the way you look into the Western universities, how the Russia or USSR was taken as an object of analysis, and so much of content that was taken in terms of understanding the various aspects of the Soviet power. So I mean, the Soviet Union was a huge source of data and information so far as content analysis is concerned, and entire content analysis has been in fact developed on the need to understand the Soviet power. So as a student, as a Russian student, this is something special to focus on that now today what is happening, it's the reverse which is happening now. As a student, or you can say of the present day Russia, you should be understanding how America is generating that data, and the data America, the US is generating such a volume of data today that you should be deploying the content analysis techniques to understand the American power today, and how the Americans, the discourse, for example, the current US elections itself, it has a matter of huge research and understanding what is happening there, the kind of the levels of political behavior that has gone into in recent days, that itself becomes a very important aspect of it. So content analysis is something which is, like, in fact, it is called the underground, or you can say it is the background of the present data analysis. So data analysis is something which is on the front, or you can say it is the frontal structure, and the content analysis is the background of that frontal structure. So it is a systematic and objective analysis of message characteristics. Because again, why I am bringing you this closer and closer, because when I will talk about Twitter, you will have to bear in mind all these facts when I am discussing with you. So the whole idea is about to understand the message, what message is being given, and various TVs, film, novels, speech, rhetorics, interpretations, conversations, critical analysis, all these aspects come from the message. So what is the message that is being given? And the various blogging sites and micro blogging sites, or the instant messaging sites, all are about the giving messages. That is why content analysis has a lot to do with understanding the what you call the social media analytics. The whole idea actually again revolves around the idea of objectivity and intersubjectivity. The point here is that if there is something which is talked about in objective terms, what is the meaning that is being conveyed, and who is the bearer of that meaning, and to whom it is directed, that is also very important in understanding. That is why his whole content analysis science actually revolves around objectivity and intersubjectivity, and the students of IR should know that this very debate of objectivity and intersubjectivity also comes in the when you go through the understanding of realism also. In realism and social constructivism, the whole idea of constructing or understanding the reality and intersubjectivity becomes a part. So here, I think here as a student of IR, you are standing very closest to the theories of IR when you come into the idea of content analysis, because the whole idea of understanding the reality is a problematic thing. There is a question mark over what is reality. Is it the fact which is real? It is the reality out there which is real. If that is real, then how to know that? Who is the communicator of that reality? So all these meta-philosophical questions come to our mind. But the point of analysis is that there is already a well identified domain that is known as the discursive reality. Discursive reality means the discourse, what I am talking, what I am speaking, what discourse, what is real into that. So whole idea of understanding reality through message becomes very important in the idea of understanding the content analysis. So contextualization of message becomes very important in what context that is done, and these are the some what you call the academic history of this content analysis. The Philip Stone's his work, and he made a computer program in 1960s again to study the USSR. This is very important, to study the relationships, and he made a computer program. These are known as General Inquirer, and they used to process the various structures, the syntactical structures. At that point of time, there was no natural language processing tools, but the idea of natural language processing was there. So there were no computational tools, but there were already the knowledge, what it means was already there. So individual messages have to be interpreted, whether it's a rhetoric or what are the psychological profiles. Some articles were also written, and based on that, some studies were also been done. So again, now let's come to the what you call the let's enter into the domain where the data is being processed by computer, but at the same time, let us also know that data being generated by the computer, and all the social media platforms such as Twitter, Facebook, you do it on computers, means your laptops or mobile. You do not do on some real. There's no hard paper book. Facebook is not hard paper book. It is only a computer program. The mobile is also running a computer program based on Android platform. So the computer mediated discourse means your discourse. See, there's a difference in understanding. Let us make this difference more clear. the whatever is being said can also be read from the paper books, or you can say newspapers and other fact. You can do content analysis of that also. But when the analytical tool itself becomes a source of content generation, means the Twitter or your Facebook, then your technology becomes the part of that message. So the role of technology in creating that discourse becomes very important, and that technology mediated discourse becomes a very different scenario. Why I'm again, please keep these things in mind, how the technology becomes very important, because I'll come later to give you many aspects of that. Technology can transfer the audio and video from one place to another. Technology can bring in virtual reality scenarios also to you. So it can influence your reaction to that. It can influence your mind to that, and your discourse can be altered. So all these are being played today. I mean, if you look into the American election and how social media is being used, all technology is being used to its extreme in influencing the voters. So that means your discourse is now largely being governed by computers, and that is where the technology mediated discourse becomes very important. So the flip side of the content analysis and computer mediated discourse is that nowadays our various mode of expression are changing very rapidly. See people using emojis to accept or endorse or reject something. These slangs are being used. The various new kind of words and vocabularies being created. The traditional understanding of words getting distorted. All these actually is being facilitated. Why? Because there is computer. You want to symbolize new meaning. You want to create meaning as a tool of your power. See, for example, what does the word mean? Me too. It does not mean maybe anything, but when the Me Too campaign, the word campaign, this whole in hashtag in Twitter started, you came to know that Me Too reveals a very specific meaning. So this whole role of technology in giving new meanings to the new words becomes very important. So your conventional words of harassment may no longer carry the kind of idea, the very idea the Me Too carries. So suddenly Me Too becomes more important, and the word harassment really does not carry that kind of communicative value. So this is how the computer mediated discourse becomes very important. So technology and semiotics, again the same discussion in a new form, that not only this but the symbols also become very important. And new kind of symbols you want to create, that becomes a very different in understanding this fact. Interpretations also, because once the symbols and the technology are being governed, then the whole idea of conceptualization, that meaning, identifying the particular group on which that meaning is to be targeted, all other aspects become very important. The people resistance becomes so means the interpretation itself becomes a battlefield in understanding and countering the various meanings itself. So this again brings it to the grounded theory of IR, perhaps one of the ideas that I had discussed in the last, so I'll just skip it. And this was the model in 1962 which Philip Stone had developed, the General Inquirer. I'll just skip certain slides because I think our lecture is getting a little bit lengthier, and now I want to talk about the real directly on Twitter, because that has becomes a very important understanding. So let us skip that. Okay, just this is well. Now let us jump to the whole idea of microblogging or the small text. The Twitter is an instrument where actually the lot of tweets you get into that, and but the point here I want to say that is that it is the stream of reactions that really make any sense. Even individual sentence will not make any sense. For example, this I have taken one case of tweet where this was a video by this was a TikTok video which was posted by one of the Twitter user, and this certainly diverted that discussion. The TikTok video, one of the reactions to the TikTok video was on Islam, that since the women appears to be a Muslim woman, so whatever value judgment they wanted to give, I don't want to comment on that. But only thing was that the discussion, the talk in the TikTok was very different. I mean, you can follow this video. This is a link which I have given to you, and you can see what video actually is. So this video was that, and one of the reactions from the video was that on the true values of Islam. And suddenly this the questioning started becoming that what exactly constitutes Islam and what not constitutes Islam, and finally it ended up on whether Trump or good, which is one is good for Islam. So I have only collected, I have deliberately avoided the names of the users, but the point is that these guys were having certain discussion on meal, and it ended into the discussion who is good for Islam, whether it's Trump or Biden. This is only of recently, I think that maybe 2-3 days back that I have collected the sequence. So this whole point is that the semantic structure becomes very important in understanding. The Twitter carries this kind of very strong weight, and perhaps it is very important to understand that it is not the one sentence or the two sentence, it is the people's chain of events or chain of reaction that becomes very important in understanding the Twitter analytics or social media analytics. So it is not very simple, it's a little bit complicated in terms of understanding the narratives. Then, is social media neutral? Another big problem is that whatever data you are getting, whether it's a value free data, it is, if it is a value laden data, then who is commanding it and who is controlling it? This is one of the I think yesterday this happened that you see, whenever the YouTube, if you have seen the YouTube, then the Russia Today, the RT.com channel is always, there's a line under to it, and that is the RT is funded in whole or in part by the Russian government. Fine, you wanted to put this information for the viewers so that they can understand whether there is any biases in the Russia Today or not. But the point is that the moment you see that the Economist openly endorsing Joe Biden, that the Donald Trump should be rejected, then this media, this news magazine, is it a neutral magazine? So there are again the value ethical questions are involved. That data that you are getting it, whether it's a biased data or it's a value neutral data, and it's very rare to understand that there is a value neutral data, because the whole, those people who are controlling the social media, they may be having their certain interests, and they may not project RT in the fair manner. At the same time they have no hesitation in actually revealing their biases. I mean, this whole slide reveals only that thing, that they want to put this RT in some kind of a negative light, but at the same time they are not really bothered about, the Western media is not bothered about even endorsing or I mean, that's not a fair play in a democracy. If you were talk of democracy, then how can a media endorse somebody in such a blatant manner? And if you go by this YouTube link, you can hear this entire discussion by the Economist, and you will be surprised to know, I mean, this is clearly a violation of the code of conduct of elections, to be as far as the Indian standards of democracy are concerned. So let's come to the part B, and this is what actually I wanted to talk about. Perhaps we have exhausted much of the time, but maybe in 15 minutes I am going to complete this whole discussion. And this is that when you use the Twitter as a tweet, it has a kind of a very typical structure, and this structure is basically in the background. You do not see these red lines you are seeing. This is a structure, and it has several values to it. I mean, say for example, when the tweet was created, what is the ID, similarly who's the user, and all these. And this data can be collected along with the text what is being used, and then you can use it for your understanding. So means this is something which is available in the public domain. So whenever you use Twitter, or whenever you tweet, every time this kind of data is generated, and there are something around these are known as entities. Means, you know, the created at ID string text, these are known as entities, and there are something around 30 to 40 entities that each tweet every time produces. So means if there are millions and millions of tweets being done on daily basis, then you can understand that millions of those multiplied by 30 to 40 entities means how much of data is being produced by Twitter on a daily basis. So this is a very important thing to understand, that the entities, you can work with the entities, means you can collect those entities and you can process those entities for your data analytics. So I've just given this various types of entities. For example, tweet objects, this I have given from the first part. Then second part is the user objects, and there are entity objects. So all these are available. You can go to the website. There is a website known as this developer.twitter.com, where you can further know about these entities. But these entities can be collected, and all you have to do is to process these entities in order to get the required information. So how it is done? there is a small Python script, there is a program which you run it, and when you run it, then what happens that it, see, again I had used the word API. So whenever you want some tweets to be downloaded on your computer for processing, you actually ask Twitter to deliver them through these keys, and these keys are basically, you can say they are generated, and this, I think some IT expert can help you in generating your each API keys. Each user can have his own keys. You have to go to the developertwitter.com website, and there you create those keys. Once you have those keys, then you can actually collect the data, and this is the small script example of the script, this API tweet count, the name New York Times. So once you have this and you run the script, something in the pink block you are seeing, the data is actually downloaded in this form. Now this is really, you cannot make out anything, you cannot make out any sense out of this data, because it is all basically in the JSON format, and in the dictionary structure it is there. So the whole task for the IT specialist is to make this data in a readable form for the students of who want to analyze this data. So this part really, you really do not need to bother about, because it can be taken care of by the IT experts. But if you want to do it on your own, excellent. So I had a small script which I have developed because I know a little bit of computing. And what I did was that I created a Twitter mining exercise with the keywords such as New York Times and Russia. This is one pair. For the second pair, Voice of America news channel, and how much data it creates for Russia, the word Russia. And the third pair which I created for the CBS News and Russia. And based on that, I was able to download at least 20,000 tweets. This was something which I had done on the 23rd October. And for again, I repeated the same exercise on the 1st of November. I was able to download 44,000 tweets. So the point here I want to say is that, see, as a student, it is good to make an experiment, but the point is that Twitter actually has certain what you call the paid mechanisms where you can download much more tweets. But for an academic exercise, or you can, if you want to download, then Twitter will only allow you to download not more than 10 to say 12 days of you can say data, not more than that. If you want to access to the archival data, then they actually ask for money. So that is something you have to decide whether you want to really pay for it, or you want to use it without money. I would advise, that without money thing is much easier for us to do. So once you do that, then this is how you actually, that pink block, that pink box that you were seeing, now that pink box can be now converted into this particular neat diagram. So you have users. Each user has certain followers. Whether this user has retweeted something, yes, then this retweet that there is a full text of it, and the range of the text means the words, how many characters it has, and the date and time, and also the location also. So again, I am running out of time, so you let me know, because if should I rejoin it, because again otherwise I will be speaking and then you will all be losing the connection. So what should I be doing, Marina? I don't have any idea about the Zoom much, so should I?
We have 9 minutes.
Okay, so in chat box of Zoom, can you just give me when there are only 2 minutes left, so that we can again start. Okay, so so these are these.
But Amrish, we have
Okay.
15
Yeah. So what should I do? Should I wind up in 5 minutes to directly go to the Minsk? I mean, only thing is that now I wanted to show some my conclusions regarding this exercise, how it was done, and so maybe should I rush through, because this is slide number 36. Okay, total slides are 52. Maybe I'll take say 1 minute. Say in 1 minute I should pass around 2-3 slides, so that I can wind up in 5 minutes. So in 10 minutes we can have discussion. Will that be okay? Okay, so this is the data frame which I generated. I am again rushing it because there's a paucity of time, and based on that I was able to collect the URLs, means the hypertext links for the tweets, and which are the most you can say retweeted URLs, which were the maximum retweeted. I can collect these also. Then I tried to bring a collage of that tweets I collected, the 20,000 tweets, and what was said by whom, and what was the maximum tweeted, you can say, the newspaper clippings. So I had just built a collage to see how this Trump and Biden debate was dragging Russia into it, and there are many, you can see many accusations, and many, you can say, you can blaming everything on Russia for every aspect. You can see these are all New York Times clippings. So much of propaganda stuff is there. So I was able to point out, I was able to identify through those data frame which were the, I mean, real, you can say, maximum tweeted newspaper clippings and headlines. So just a brief of that. Then the most tweeted words, I was able to collect the list. So you can see Russia was tweeted 12,000 times in those 20,000 tweets, Trump 11,000 times, and then you have story of diplomats. Then I was able to also create the negative tweets and positive tweets segment also, and you can see how negative tweet, the blue bars in the left, in the right hand side bottom corner, the blue bars are very high. And there are, it is the date wise. So on 20th October you see very high negative tweets, and 21st October very high negative tweets against Russia. And then the frequency of the tweets that you on each day you can collect, and you can do that. Then the intensity of textual tweets, you don't have to go into this. Then these are the networks which was able to develop. Means, for example, the how many times the particular text was tweeted and who tweeted whom. So these are very interesting patterns. So somebody who was actually say broadcaster, anybody who see my tweet, on an average I get hardly 2 or 3 likes or retweets, but somebody getting 1,000 and 2,000 tweets, that means there is some particular motive to it. So these are the various tweet communities based on the various slicing of the retweets. So you can see there are very different structures. The tweets which are 1 to 35, their structure is very different. Those which were tweeted 100 to 200 times, some kind of noise is there. Then the 1,000 to 2,000, very different structure. So all these actually can be further analyzed. So I just wanted to give you an idea what kind of study you can do through Twitter data analytics. Then what was the 1,000 to 2,000 maximum retweet? I just wanted to show you that this was the tweet which was tweeted for more than 1,500 times, or say 7.2 thousand likes, or 1.5 thousand times it was retweeted. So this was the tweet.